Have you ever wondered what God is doing when life just doesn't seem to make sense? Today we'll look at the story of Paul in prison, who had 40 assassins who vowed not to eat until they murdered Paul. And at one of Paul's lowest moments where nothing made sense, Jesus stands with him and tells him, "Be of good cheer." Paul was a Roman citizen in the early AD who persecuted and killed the early Christians. One day, as he was traveling to Damascus to arrest Christians, Jesus appeared to him in a bright light and told him, "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting." Paul's encounter led him to turn the other way and spend the rest of his life teaching how anyone too can turn from their old ways to Jesus and be completely forgiven of their sin. Our story begins with Paul's friends praying for him as he goes back to Jerusalem to share about the hope of Jesus dying on the cross for their sin. But when Paul arrives and shares about Jesus with his fellow Jews, he's mobbed and arrested by a violent crowd, so much so that the Roman soldiers had to actually save Paul. Even the Roman commanders were confused and didn't know what to do and why the Jews hated Paul, so they kept him in prison. While in prison, Paul experienced a low moment in his life. He loved his people so much so that he only wanted to share how Jesus died for them and was calling them to turn from their old ways to God. And here he was in prison, unable to share of this hope he knew. But it says in Acts 23 that Jesus came to Paul and stood by him. Jesus promised every believer that he will always be with us. Matthew 28. Paul's situation would get a lot worse, as we learn soon after that 40 assassins plotted to go on a hunger strike until they murdered Paul. Yet in prison, Jesus tells Paul, "Be of good cheer." Most often we want God to deliver us from our circumstances. But more often, God wants to meet us right in our circumstances, not because everything seems fine to us, but because God is on his throne and working all things together for the good. His plans are always much better than what we can ever imagine. If we only knew what God knows, we would want exactly everything he has in store for us. We can always be of good cheer because the worst thing that could ever happen to us was defeated on the cross. John 16:33 says, "In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world." We learn later in the story that indeed God was faithful. Not only did Paul get a chance to share the hope of Christ, but he was able to share it in front of a number of high officials, the king, and eventually Caesar himself. God's plans are always much better than our own. In Isaiah 55 it says, "For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." The question is, are we willing to simply give up on our own plans and draw near to Him, trusting that we can be of good cheer no matter the circumstances? Because His ways are always higher and better than ours. And His ways are for our highest good, because His reputation rests on leading us along the right paths. In Psalm 23 it says, "He guides me along the right paths for His name's sake."